All right. I have waited a couple of days since the initial release of the Epstein files based on the congressional order, or however it worked, that set a deadline for the 19th. And I had an initial reaction to it that I decided not to upload. I was just like, that's really pushing it, really on the borderline of what's acceptable, what could get me in trouble. So then I was like, I'll delete that. I'll wait. Maybe something will come up. And today I've noticed that somebody managed to kind of fiddle with the DOJ website and was able to access the 8th volume of these files, given that there were only seven volumes made publicly available. Somebody figured out that they put the number 8 on the end, and it was like, oh, there's another one. This one is very heavily redacted. However, it does implicate something like 10 co-conspirators that were known of as far back at least as 2019. And I'm not here to discuss it like that. I'm not going to, look at that. You could find a million videos on YouTube or anywhere else of people already talking about that. So I'm not going to talk about that. What I'm going to talk about is the fact that it is pretty obvious that there are definitely people appointed by Trump working in his administration who are actively protecting the people implicated. Now, my understanding is that the federal law regarding release of documents, freedom of information or otherwise, the redaction of victims' information, that there is specifically an absence of protection for people who are simply politically or socially sensitive, which is to say famous, that don't need to have their names blanked out. There's no legal reason for it. There is a corruption reason for it. And if you kind of do some digging on the initial cases that started back in Florida against Mr. Epstein, you will find that there was a prosecutor for the state who was heavily involved, I believe, to some degree at least, was definitely involved in the sweetheart deal on the government's end. And that former district attorney or whatever it was she was in Florida is now the United States Attorney General. So the issue that we actually have a couple of issues here. The first issue is actually constitutional, and not just constitutional, but declarational. And what I mean by that is that the United States Constitution, which establishes the function and role of the federal government and its ability to regulate or moderate disputes between individual states who have their own sets of rights. The Constitution, however, derives its legal basis from the Declaration of Independence, which is itself a founding document and considered part of the supreme law of the land. If not for that Declaration of Independence, the Constitution would not really have standing. It would just be a declaration itself of, we can do what we want. But having a declaration first sent to the authority that was governing the colonies at that time and saying, these are the complaints that we have, these are the problems that we cannot abide by. And among that was a very clear description of the rule of law and the fact that it comes from the consent of the governed. That is to say, the people allow governance upon them. And 2, equal application of the law, and also therefore justice. That if you are playing favorites, if you are being overly harsh to one and overly soft to another, you are negating the authority by which the government has any right to operate or exist. What this comes to is, if we are going to continually allow the elites to get away with whatever, rape, murder, sexually assaulting kids, whatever, if we are going to allow them to get away with it, we have no right to impose the enforcement of law on the little people. To do so would be outright tyranny with a capital T. It would be government corruption. It would be illegitimate government. And at this time, that is kind of where we stand. That's the thing. They are letting those motherfuckers get away with everything. And they're trying to, and, you know, don't get me started on the border patrol stuff, right? Because we need to have a solid border. We need this thing to be enforced, right? But there is no authority to do so, nor to arrest anyone, a private citizen, for anything, regardless of what the law says, if you are not also taking after these rich pieces of shit. If they get to get away with it, we get to get away with it. And I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying fair is fair. That's what it is. This is why we have a First Amendment to our Constitution, the freedom of speech to complain, to criticize, to call these things out, to gather peaceably and petition for a redress of grievances. But as we saw on January 6th, 2021, the ability to gather peaceably to petition a redress of grievances is bound to get undercut and, how should we say, co-opted by people from within that corrupt, tyrannical government that we are trying to redress grievances. And the thing is, peaceably assembling and petitioning for a redress of grievances is only functional if there is good faith on the part of the government. And as soon as the government has no good faith, that First Amendment right has to be protected by the Second Amendment rights. And there was an entire chunk between commas that was, for whatever reason, deleted from the final verbiage before being approved. The reason why people say that the Second Amendment doesn't really make grammatical sense is because it doesn't. The necessity of a free state and the people, comma, in order, this is the part that was deleted, in order to secure peace and prevent tyranny, comma, right? The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It was a grievous mistake to take that out. And I think they were afraid that it meant that anytime people got upset about something with the government didn't listen, they would probably just take up arms. And guess what? That's how it should have been. Because the government is just a front for power. It is just the attempt to control large groups of people. And in some cases, it's not necessary to attempt to control large groups of people. Sometimes you just need to let people govern themselves. States set up their own laws, things can be handled, right? But the federal government continually grows and oversteps its reach. So with all of that in mind, if the government is going to continue to protect elite sex offenders, people that are trafficking humans, people that are engaging in slavery, people that are committing things crime-wise that would get any normal person like you or me locked in prison forever. We could all, as a civilian populace, stop paying our taxes, first and foremost. It's one thing if one person evades taxes. But if everyone does it, the government is going to run out of enforcement. And the enforcement that they're going to run out of is going to run out even quicker when there are no funds. Secondly, our income tax, if we were to stop paying that, stop paying sales tax, stop paying income tax, stop paying any tax, the government will be paralyzed very quickly. And the only people that are willing to take any action after that point are people who are willing to be tyrants, in which case the Second Amendment is actually pretty clear. Even with that missing sentence out, it's pretty clear. That's what it's there for. That's why it's there. The government can't tell us we can't. And the government starts being corrupt and unfair. We have the ability to say, okay, it's about to change and it's about to get nasty. Doesn't matter that they have nukes and F-15s. It really doesn't. about 3% of the population is all that is required to completely outnumber the entire government. What really needs to happen, though, is the people like Bondi, like that deputy, was that the deputy attorney general, that slimy dude that was on NBC talking about deflection from every single question, and what about the Ghislaine Maxwell, she interviewed you and the next day she moved over to a different, oh, that's a Bureau of Prisons thing, so I don't really know. All the people that are doing that, we need to get 2 railroad ties per individual of those people so that we may construct crucifixes out of them, that upon which we may literally crucify these scumfucks alive. And then, once they are nailed to the wood, hanging by their own weight, we set the stake on fire. I don't know how many people it's going to be that has to do that. I really don't. But I do know that we need to crucify all of those people protecting the pedos. All of the people in government that are just dragging their feet and be like, oh, we need to crucify them alive and burn them at the stake. Simultaneously, every elected member of the government must be tarred and feathered. Hot tar, scalding on the skin, feathers thrown on that you can't pick out until the skin heals. Pain, embarrassment, this is what must occur. Simultaneously, some of the most painful ways to go must take place for the people who are protecting the monsters. And only then will the message have been sent that there are way more of us and we are not cool with the way things are being done. What it really amounts to is, if the government wishes to continue to exist, they are going to have to start doing the right thing, or it's going to become unavoidable. We will become ungovernable, all of us. Because people will see it and they'll be like, oh, wait just a minute. And it's like, you can't just put your head down. That could be your kids next. And as such, something must be done. I was going to hold back on this. I wasn't going to say anything necessarily about it at first. I wanted to give it a little bit of time to air out and see what would happen. But the more I'm seeing, the more I'm realizing they keep playing little manipulative games, little breadcrumb releases without anything of real substance to kind of keep people back and forth. And it's like they say about psyop fatigue, right? Like, I'm getting tired of having my brain fucked with. Everyone else should be getting tired of it too. So the people who are directly protecting the monsters must be crucified alive and burned alive. And everyone else that is supposed to serve the public, but is clearly not, they're serving special interests, they're serving re-election, they're serving donors, they're serving foreign countries. All of those people should have their epidermis scarred for life, burned full body from the scalding tar, and rendered uncomfortable, unable to relax, unable to lay down even, because of getting poked by the little pieces of feather. That's what they deserve. That's what they need. That's what I got. I hope you agree. This is a thing that's going to happen, because if we just keep letting them walk all over us, our civilization is doomed. Things will continue to get worse, and it'll be worse than any fucked up movie that you thought would tell about what could happen if things got worse. We, the people, have to do something about it, and that's what we have to do.